Hi again, whiskey enthusiasts. It's Brett, and I'm back with something very special today to taste. I was lucky enough to get a hold of a little bit of the 2017 edition of the Thomas H. Handy Rye. I live in the middle of the country, and allocated stuff doesn't really show up to us that often. I've tasted the 2016 Handy. I loved it. It's one of my favorite ryes ever. I've never actually owned a bottle of anything from Handy. So I'm very excited to try this. The little tag on my bottle here says that it is 127.2 proof. So it's pretty high up there. It ought to be fairly hot. They didn't put on it the age that this year's Handy is. You can look that up yourself, I'm sure. It has a quite delicate nose for something of this proof. It's both floral and spicy. You've got a battle of flowers fighting for domination with some really nice nutmeg and cinnamon. The floral was stronger when I started. As I go back to nose it again and again, the floral moves to the back and I get more spice. I'm getting absolutely no burn on the nose whatsoever. That's the surprise. There's a little bit of caramel underneath. But to be honest, the spice and the floral notes really dominate the nose. Let's see if it's as gentle on the palate as it is on the nose. It starts delicate. It builds very quickly. The floral notes come forward at the beginning. Once the spice hits, you start to get a lot of pine and licorice. Yeah, the last half of the palate has a lot of pine and licorice to it. More so, I believe, than the previous Handy that I had tasted. The heat lets itself be known a little more. It surprised me just a little bit because of how delicate the nose was. The more I sip it, the more the pine notes, the licorice, and the floral tones down, just like they did in the nose. The spice starts to let itself be known a lot more. You get a lot of cinnamon. Now I'm getting some clove that I didn't get in the nose at all. But when you get to the finish, it's the licorice, some pepper, the floral notes that really shine through in the finish. I'm getting some spice in the finish, but only because I'm looking for it. The other notes are overwhelming the spice when you get to the finish. It's an unusually floral finish. Usually the floral is, in my experience, fading by the time you get to the finish. There's also some heat that comes out in the finish, and it finally lets you know that, hey, this is 127 proof. I don't have very much left here. I'm going to put a couple of drops of water in this just to see what it'll do, because I do get a lot of heat at the end. All right. I highly recommend that you drink this with a few drops of water. Highly recommend it. It's way more balanced. What I was getting without the water was spikes of different flavors throughout the palate and the finish. You would get these huge blasts. You get the big blast of the floral, you get the big blast of the licorice, you get the big blast of the pine. And they start to make it disjointed. But once I added a couple of drops of water, everything started to blend together. It really did release some things in a more balanced way. Definitely put some water in this one. This is a very good whiskey. I'm not 100% convinced that I like it better than last year's Handy, but I've not tasted them side by side, so that's a little bit off of memory. This is a very good rye. I'm not certain also that I would say that this particular rye is the best I've ever had. Without comparing them side by side, I'm going to slightly give the edge to last year's Handy, and also to some Lock, Stock, and Barrel that I tried in the past. So there you have it. It's well worth a drink. But as I feel about almost everything, don't go running out there and pay secondary prices for this stuff. It's whiskey. It's a $100 whiskey. It's a good $100 whiskey. It's not a $350 whiskey. And it never will be. So don't feed the hype. Maybe you can get a drink at a bar. Maybe you can get a drink from a friend. Nothing's worth, there's nothing in the rye world that's worth $350. Just my opinion, guys. Enjoy your whiskey. Go out and get you something you love.